On behalf of the League of Women Voters, I welcome all of you.
Are they on?
Are we on back there? Can you hear now?
Sounds better.
Okay, I'll move the mic a little bit. Can you hear me now? Okay. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, I want to welcome everyone. And before we begin, I want to make a few announcements. First of all, no one can videotape while this is going on. Please. This is being live streamed. It's being filmed. And if there are people here who might want to tell somebody who's not here to see it, then it's on the City of Cortez website, which is cityofcortez.com. And apparently there's a little thing down in the corner about live streaming, so people can look at it and refer to it. The other thing, I would ask everybody to please silence your phones so that doesn't come across on the video. I'm Judy Schoenemeyer, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters, and I'm going to moderate this forum tonight. It's a forum, it's not a debate. The League is a nonpartisan political group. That means we don't take stands on candidates or parties. And we don't allow any kind of campaign buttons, hats, whatever, in here. So if you have one on, please take it off. The candidates took theirs off. Everyone else, if you're wearing one, should take it off. If you picked up campaign material out there, that's fine, but nobody's going to distribute it in here. I want to thank the City of Cortez for allowing us to use this nice facility, and especially Ann Smith, the city clerk, who is the one that makes it all happen. She gets all the jobs that people don't want, whether she likes it or not, including running city elections. There are candidate materials out there if you want to pick some up. There are league pamphlets if you didn't get one. This is what it looks like. And what this is a summary of the issues state issues that will be on the ballot. And it's in an easy to understand format, unlike the Blue Book. Obviously, you can go through the Blue Book and see the text of what's being proposed and everything else, but this gives you what it does and the pros and cons, those who are for it and those who are against it. It's much easier to use than the Blue Book. So if you'd like to have one, Eleanor has some she can pass out. If you want one, you can raise your hand. And I think there's probably more still out on the table. I want to mention one other thing, because the League of Women Voters in Colorado has taken a stand on this, and the legislature unanimously put it on the ballot. And I want you to take a look at your ballot when you get it, and at this or at the Blue Book. Amendments Y and Z would put an end to gerrymandering in this state. As you probably know, every 10 years when there's a census, districts get redrawn in each state and for state offices, which these people are running for, and also for congressional districts. Right now, in this state, there's only one truly competitive congressional district, because the lines have been drawn in such a way to benefit one party or the other, and they all do it. But the legislators realize this is not a good way to do it, so we all have a chance to vote to choose an independent way for this to happen. And there are two of them, because one is Congress and the other one is the state offices. So you need to vote for two of them so that we can end the gerrymandering. So with that, I would just like to tell you a little bit about election procedures, and you all probably know this, and if you were at the forum last month, you've already heard it. Next week, the ballots are going to be mailed. So watch for your ballot in the mail. We've heard about some people that have mixed up their ballots with all the junk mail that we all get. So just be on the watch for it, and if you don't get it in a reasonable time, like by the following week, you need to let the clerk's office know and get a ballot. If you're going to mail it, you have to mail it at least 5 days ahead. Better 1 week ahead, because the mail goes to Albuquerque and has to come back. So don't rely on the mail unless you give plenty of advance preparation for that. On election day, ballots will be able to be dropped off at the public libraries in Mancos and Dolores from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So if you want to do that, instead of mailing it or instead of coming to Cortez, you may do that. Also, there is a drop-off box behind the city clerk's office, which is county clerk's office, sorry, which is in the old First National Bank building, in case you haven't been in there. So there's an alley that runs behind that building, and you can drop off your ballot in there. You can get out of your car, go inside and drop it off, or if you live in Dolores or Mancos, you can take it to the library on election day. Okay, with all of that out of the way, I want to tell you what some of our guidelines are. Because we are part of a state and a national organization, we have to follow certain guidelines. For that reason, we don't allow political material in here, campaign material. All the questions are in writing, and they all have to be addressed to all the candidates. You can't single out a single candidate to ask a question, because if you do, it won't get asked. They're all running for state office, so they're all going to have basically the same responsibilities. The first part will be each candidate will be allowed 2 minutes to tell us about themselves. And since none of them live here, I doubt that very many of us know them. Some people may have met some of them, but I bet a lot of you haven't met any of them. The questions will have a minute to answer, and we have a timekeeper and a helper. And for the benefit of the candidates, she'll let you know when it's 30 seconds and 15 seconds. And then when you hear the squeak, that means you have to sit down.
You're all in all that.
You have to yes, well, you get squeaked, yes.
That'll work.
Okay. I am sure, and I hope I'm not being presumptuous about this, but I'm sure that these candidates would be happy to answer questions afterwards. I can tell you right now, we have so many questions, they're not all going to get answered in the period of time that we have. So if your question doesn't get answered, feel free to catch them out in the lobby and ask your question. Okay, at the end, they'll all get to have 2 minutes to sum up. But to start with, I'm going to ask each of you to tell us about yourself, where you live, what your experience is, what your work life has been. If you want to talk about your family, that's fine, but most of us don't know you, so if you can tell us a little bit about yourself, that would be helpful. At the end, you'll get the chance to do your campaign speech and tell us why we should vote for you. But I am going to start with the person whose name does not begin, last name does not begin with C, and that's Gwen Unger. So, Gwen, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, that's all right. So I'm Gwen Unger. I'm running for the Senate. I was born in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. My father was a career Army officer, so we moved around all over the place. I graduated from Frankfurt American High School in Frankfurt, Germany, when we were stationed over there. I then moved to Houston and went to Rice University, got a degree in electrical engineering. So once I graduated, I worked in a number of different places. I worked for 2 years on the space shuttle design team at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. I've also worked in the oil industry. I've owned 3 small businesses. I've worked in corporate America. The last job I had was leading a software implementation team around the world, and we did projects in all sorts of places, including China. I also served 28 years in the U.S. Army Reserve and retired with the rank of lieutenant colonel. So, I've obviously been a lot of places, worked with a lot of people, and I think that's, one of the things that I think would fit really well into this job is being able to understand people from all sorts of different walks of life. We moved to Forest Lakes, which is between Bayfield and Vallecito, about 5.5 years ago. I had always wanted to live in the mountains and had never managed to do it until we decided to retire. So that's basically it. I have wife Shauna and 3 kids. 2 of them are in Austin, and my daughter goes to CU Boulder. So, I've just really in the last 3 or 4 years gotten involved in politics and getting out there trying to make things happen. So that's basically who I am, and as I said, we'll be glad to answer questions after this.
Okay, thank you. I forgot to mention that the people on this side are running for the state senate, and the people on this side are running for the state house, in case you didn't know that. That was an oversight. Okay, Don.
Thank you very much, and it's nice to be here with the league, and it was nice to drive down from Montrose today in the rain. Had a little snow along the way, and it was great to see. My wife Diana, almost 52 years, and she has actually been one of my big helpers and allies. I've been in the House of Representatives for 6 years, and I've been in the Senate for 2 years. I took Senator Roberts' the last half of her term. My background is I was born in a farm and ranch operation. My dad ran stockyards and livestock handling facilities in Grand Junction and Montrose. But I've been in agriculture my whole life. I'm still in agriculture. But I also have dealt in the mining industry, mainly doing a lot of environmental remediation. Used to do a lot of work for the state of Colorado till I got elected, and then after that, my one and only customer is U.S. Department of Energy. I serve on the Agricultural, Natural Resources, and Judiciary Committee, and also Interim Water Committee, and the Wildfire Matters Committee. I chair that committee, and it's some of the things that's really been important to us in the district. I'm probably one of the most active legislators there. I ran about 10% of the legislation that was introduced in Colorado last year. I do that because I know how to build relationships. I know how to work with people, and I know how to get it done. And I went in that I will. My word is my bond, and I've stayed with that, and it's been very, very successful. And the reason I ran so many bills is people on the other side of the aisle, Republicans, Democrats in the House, they all want a Senate sponsor that can get it across the line, and I'm that person. Could I have my 2 seconds back?
Okay, Mark.
Thank you. Well, my name is Mark Catlin. I'm from Montrose. I was born and raised there. I was born on a row crop farm out west of Montrose. I'm still a farmer. But during my life, I owned a real estate company. That was the first job I had off the farm, as I got a real estate license. And I was in the real estate business until the United Banks of Colorado came, knocked on my door and asked me what would it take to get you into the banking industry. Well, I had a brand new boy of 6 months old at that time. I said, probably a monthly check would help to get me in there. So I went to work for United Banks of Colorado as an ag lender during the 80s, from 83 until 88. So we went through that terrible time of people losing their farms and those kind of things. I then got into the water business. I went back to college and got a degree in business and emphasis in public policy from Mesa College, and as an adult, came home and I got a job as assistant manager at the Uncompahgre Valley Water Users. So I served as assistant manager of the Uncompahgre for 6 years. Yeah, 6 years, and then I was manager there for nearly 10. My life has been spent in water. That's really where the equity in my life is. I sat on the Colorado River District Board. I've been president of the Colorado Water Congress. I sat on the Ag Committee board, on the Ag Committee in the House, Ag, Water, Natural Resources. I also sat on the Public Health and Human Services Committee. This is the most important job I've ever had in my life. And, I would like to go back. I want you to know that. But it's an important job, and anybody that goes really needs to be prepared. Thank you.
Got under the squeaker, too. Seth.
Hi, everybody. I'm Seth Kagan. I was born in Denver, grew up on the Front Range, and have lived on the Western Slope for the last 30 years. I've lived here longer than I've lived anywhere else in my life. I've spent 50 of my 65 years in Colorado. But my roots actually go back, in southwestern Colorado, actually go back even further than that. My father was a uranium prospector here in the early 1950s before I was born. My parents, when they were in their early 20s, lived for a time in Hesperus. One of my earliest childhood memories was the light bulb that went on when I understood why Sleeping Ute was called Sleeping Ute. About 30 years ago, my wife and I moved back to Telluride, where we could raise our son and where we started a small business. We started the Watch newspaper, and it started around our kitchen table. My wife and I did all the writing and editing, and we laid out the paper at our kitchen table. And then when it was done, I put the flats in the car and drove here to Cortez, to the old Cortez Press, where the newspaper was printed, and I would spend a couple of hours cooling my heels in town while the paper was printed, and then I drove it back up to Telluride and distributed it. The paper eventually grew to be quite large. It covered news in San Miguel, Montrose, and Ouray counties, and had quite a few employees. And I did everything: bottle washing, floor scrubbing, editorial writing, newspaper, and political reporting as well. During that period of time, I covered probably more government meetings. I attended more government meetings than many government officials did. And I feel like I saw government that worked well and government that worked not so well. I've also served on nonprofit boards and ran a small business in Colorado. So I feel like I'm very well prepared to serve in the Colorado legislature.
Okay. We have two questions that are sort of related, so I will ask them together, and if you need to have one of them repeated, I will do that. We'll start with you, Don. What is the most important issue facing the state? What are the most important issues facing this part of the state?
Well, I think, and we've talked about this before, jobs in the economy and health insurance. We have the highest insurance in the state of Colorado, and almost the nation. And we've done several things over there, but frankly, our city cousins, they would rather see us pay that high rate, because we've ran legislation trying to address that cost. And it's always died. Some of them die in the House, some of them die in the Senate. But I think we've got to do a lot of things to change that so our insurance is more affordable. One of the things that we've talked about, I actually ran this to Secretary Price, and that try to create nationwide time zones. So if you're in the Mountain Time Zone, any insurance provider in the state you would be part of that pool, and I think that would be something.
Do you want to answer the one about this area? You mentioned health insurance.
Well, I think.
Because this was two questions.
This is two questions, okay. I was trying to do them in one. Yeah, I think it's a very similar problem. I think we've got a lot of problems in southwest Colorado. I was a big supporter of Senate Bill 267, because I think without 267, I think the chances, that was the hospital provider fee. I think there's a good possibility that your hospital in Cortez would not be here. It would be on life support itself. And I think that was a huge issue. And of course, we're always interested in trying to keep the economy going. I know Kinder Morgan is about 50% of your tax base, and I think that's very important that we work with them and keep that going. And of course, water is the big issue, because your water is the target. The lower basin states want your water, the Front Range wants your water, and anything that we have to do in compact compliance, you're the target.
Mark, do you want me to repeat the questions?
Sure.
What is the most important issue facing the state, and what are the most important issues in this part of the state? And because these are two questions, you can have a little more time.
Okay. Well, from my viewpoint, I would imagine in this area, and I know this, the water is the big issue. For the southwest corner of the state of Colorado, you have the youngest, or the youngest water right of any size in the state of Colorado out here in your reservoir. If the state of Colorado were ever put on a strict administration, your water would be the first to go. That, to me, is a serious, serious problem. I believe in the prior appropriation doctrine, but we need to be taking a look at what the Front Range and those people can do in regards to using less of the Western Slopes water on a trans-mountain basis over to the Front Range out of the Colorado River Basin. You being part of that Colorado River Basin, even though you meet the Colorado River out in Utah, it's something we're all going to have to really be concerned about. And I am concerned about it. Those are the kind of things that I expect to be able to do.
Okay.
State of Colorado?
State of Colorado.
Well, I could just make you a long list. The state of Colorado has got some serious problems in regards to natural resources. I believe that the state and the Front Range really are going to have to do something about their consumptive use of Colorado River water. We do need to get the economy. We have the #1 economy in the state of the United States, yet it's not bringing itself to the western slope of Colorado, and particularly not down here to Cortez. So one of the things that I think we need to do is we need to get bigger jobs, better jobs into the state of Colorado and disperse them throughout our area. And our forests and ag and natural resources is where I would focus those jobs. Well, I got 15 seconds. I thought you were waving that paddle at me. So those are the kind of things that I'm trying to do in the state of Colorado on the Ag, Water, and Natural Resources Committee. Those are the things that I've been focusing on, is what can we do here in the southwest part of the state of Colorado.
Okay. Would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Since I started my campaign a year ago, and especially since March when I started knocking on doors, I've knocked on 7,000 doors. And I've asked every single person who answers the door what issues are most important to them. And the issues are always the same. They don't have access, people are worried that they don't have access to affordable health care. Many, many, many people in the 58th House District simply cannot afford health insurance. That's unacceptable. The second issue that always comes up when I ask people what issues are important to them is funding for education. The schools in southwestern Colorado and many districts are the lowest funded school districts in the state, and the state is one of the bottom 5 school districts, 5 states in the country for school funding. So the school district in Cortez is a poster child for an underfunded school district. Many of you know that because you have kids in the school here, or grandchildren, or friends, and whenever the state wants, whenever NPR or somebody else, Colorado Public Radio or somebody else wants to do a story about the impacts of underfunded schools, they come to Cortez. It's not much better in Montrose. The third issue that everybody brings up is protecting the natural environment. They're mindful of the drought, they're worried about water, they're worried about forest fires, they're worried about beetle kill, they're worried about global warming. So those are issues that come up over and over and over again when you knock on doors, and I agree that those are the biggest issues in the district. If I have a little more time to address the state piece, I do think that those are the same issues that need to be addressed statewide. I think healthcare, there are many options for reducing the cost of healthcare. I think Senator Quorum is correct that there are political obstacles to achieving some of those goals, but a public option on the insurance marketplace is one way that we could reduce healthcare costs in Western Colorado. One of the reasons the costs are so high is that all the insurance companies, most of them have pulled out of rural places, and in the absence of competition, prices have gone up. Another problem is that healthcare costs statewide are growing at about 25% faster than the national average. And so those are both issues that need state regulation, state administration to address. I strongly urge support of Amendment 73. That will go a long way to helping the education problem. There are many, many other educational issues, though, that I would address, including funding for all-day preschool and all-day kindergarten, and relief from student debt for higher education.
Okay, Gwen, you didn't get to answer those questions.
Okay.
Do you want me to repeat them?
No, I'm good. So let's talk about the state first. So if this question had been asked a couple weeks ago, I might have said something different. You may be aware that in the last week and a half, there's been a couple of very dire sorts of things come out in terms of global warming and climate change. The Trump administration has actually said that if we don't do anything to stop it, that the temperature at the end of the century is going to be 7 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than it is now. And that's, you know, that basically translates into drier and hotter. And that's not good for the state. So the other thing that came out, of course, the UN commission that's targeted with this has said that if we don't get pretty close to carbon neutral by 2030, that we may pass that point of no return where there's nothing that we can do about it. And I know this is a very contentious sort of thing. There's some people that just flat don't believe it's changing or don't believe it's the carbon that's doing that. So that's at the state level. In terms of locally, I'm just like Seth. I've been going around talking to people around the district, and the number one thing they talk about is health care. And I talked to a lady from Durango who said her son moved from Denver to Durango, and his policy cost doubled. So there's no question that we're paying much, much higher rates here on the western slope than people on the Front Range. And I know it's a hard lift to talk about doing something about that, because obviously if we're going to bring our rates down, it's going to push rates up a little bit on the Front Range, although the population difference means theirs wouldn't go up nearly as much as ours would come down. But one of the things I really like to do is to pass a bill that says if you're an insurance company, health insurance company, you want to sell in the state of Colorado, you have to sell in every county, and you have to sell at the same price in every county, so that we're acting as a state instead of individual counties on something as important as health care.
Okay. This is a local issue, but it's probably an issue for this whole region. What would you do to assure there are adequate detox facilities in the area? And let's see, Mark, I think it's your turn to go first.
Thank you. You know, I do agree that the opioid crisis and methamphetamine and the other drugs are serious problems in our area. Maybe even worse in the southwest part of the state than in others. I'm a believer that we should strengthen our mental health system. I have voted yes on mental health. I believe that one of the things that I would like to see done is the clinics that are in the community. I would like to be able to expand them to a certain degree so that we can take these patients in, start them with a detox of some sort, so that we can get them down and off of those drugs. It's a thorny problem because the Front Range is always sucking up all of the money. That giant sucking sound is Denver, believe me, because they think they've got this problem so much worse than we do. They may have more numbers, but we have just as many in percentages.
Okay, Seth?
Yeah, the shortfall or the shortage of mental health treatment options and drug treatment options is something else I hear when I knock on doors. I've heard really tragic stories from people who answer doors about the difficulties they and their loved ones and friends have had getting treatment for drug issues as well as mental health issues. There was a story on Colorado Public Radio that focused on southwestern Colorado, I believe on the Montezuma County Sheriff, who talked about how the main treatment facility for drug addiction here is the county jail. And that people go to jail, they clean up because they're locked behind bars, and then they're released and they immediately get addicted again because the jail isn't equipped to treat them. So more funding statewide for opioid and other drug addictions is critical, and I would fully support any effort in the legislature to provide those services.
So last month, I went to the Community Health Action Coalition meeting in Durango, and it's a group of different people who try to do things. And the talk was by a physician who actually runs one of the 2 full-service addiction clinics on the Western Slope. One's in Durango, and the other's either in Montrose or Grand Junction. So the entire Western Slope, that's all we have in terms of full service. And it was really interesting because he's talking about how difficult it really is to get people off of addiction, whether it's an alcohol addiction or an opioid addiction or heroin or whatever it is. And it takes a real concerted effort and a lot of time and a lot of money, and we just don't have the facilities here. Durango is the closest one for people here, and in the case of, they were just talking about methadone, they have to come in every day when they first start the methadone treatment because they don't trust them to take, a week's worth. So clearly we just need more clinics, and we're going to have more money for that.
Okay, Don?
Yes, thank you. That's a huge problem, and we have to fund it better. We passed some legislation last year to make the doctors a little more aware of the opioid problem and kind of cut back on the prescriptions. But I was talking to the doctor in Durango, and the clinic was actually very close to shutting down because the state wasn't providing the money that they were owed in a timely fashion, and they almost had to close. We made some phone calls and got some money to them, but we definitely have to put more money into that. I think there's other things that we can do. There's products out there that seem to be very effective in getting them off opioids, and we will continue with that. And it's a huge problem. Deaths are rampant. I think Montrose and Montezuma last year each had like 5 opioid deaths. They were laced with fentanyl, and that's Russian roulette when you start using that.
Okay. I think everybody had a chance to answer that question. Am I right?
Yes.
If I get out of sync, you all have to remind me. Some of you have spoken to this, but there have been about 3 people that have submitted this question or something related to it, so I'm going to ask it. And we're going to start with Seth. Do you support Amendment 73? If not, how do you think the state should fund education?
Starting with me.
Yes.
Yes, I very strongly support Amendment 73. Again, visiting with voters, I have found that once the amendment is explained to them, there's almost universal support for it, especially from parents. I think is the best, it's a good way and the best way to bring Colorado out of the bottom states in the country in per pupil student funding, school funding. But Amendment 73 is not the be-all and end-all in terms of education. Even if Amendment 73 fails, then we're going to have to keep fighting to find more funding for Colorado schools. Even if it passes, there's going to be a lot of educational issues that need to be attended to, including, as I mentioned earlier, funding for all-day kindergarten and preschool, because studies show that a quick early start in education changes the course of people's lives. Teacher training, teacher shortages, college tuition, college state support for universities is woefully, we're 49th in the country in support for higher education. And there's many issues on education beyond 73 that need to be attended to.
Okay.
So I also support 73. I don't, it's like anything else. It may not be the ideal solution, but it is a way to get things going. I think that, unless the voters are in fact willing to increase taxes in order to fund education, it's not going to happen. So we talk about this a couple different ways. Why do we have to worry about education? Well, of course, we want our kids to get a good education so that they can get good jobs. But the other part is we start talking about economic development, and we want companies to come in here. We want them to relocate here. We want them to start here, and we want them to bring good paying jobs. Well, guess what? If we have subpar schools, they don't do that. When a company looks to relocate or where they're going to start a business, they look at the schools. It's one of the big things, because the employees' kids are all going to end up going to those schools. So we really have to do something. I think that 73 is the best option that we have right now to make sure that we really get going on strengthening our schools.
I am in opposition of 73. I think when you look at, you say you have to have good jobs to have good schools. Corporations don't want to move to an area where there's higher taxes. They don't do that. As far as funding goes for schools, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding, because every child in the state receives the same amount of money. You have the local tax base, and that is collected from the county, and what doesn't come up to that standard, the state backfields. So, and the fact is, we're about number 30 in the nation in school funding. We're about middle of the road, and it's a fact. You can look it up. It's there. You hear a lot of stories, but you need to verify things that you're saying.
Okay. Mark?
Thank you. I oppose 73 for 2 or 3 reasons. One, I don't think we should have graduated income tax. That seems to work against this state. Secondly, if we were to do this, if this passes, your county clerk is going to be completely covered up, because, and the assessor and the treasurer, because you're going to have to send 2 tax bills, one for the school and one for the county, because they're going to set the assessment rate at 7 rather than at the 6.2, if that's what Gallagher calls for as we go forward. I think there are better ways to do this. I think the communities need to be engaged a whole lot more in regards to the quality of schools that they've got. And the state does make a big donation or a big payment to the local school districts. Each student is at about $13,000 per student per year in the state of Colorado. I don't think we're getting our investment out of it.
Okay, Seth, we started with you last time, did we? Okay, so we're back to Gwen. Do you support Amendment 74? And why or why not? Amendment 74, and there's some other questions here that are related to this, has to do with people being allowed to sue if they think their property has been devalued because of the action of a governmental entity. Am I right, basically, in that description? So the question is, do you support it, or why not?
Okay, I absolutely am against that. If you think that the Kavanaugh hearings were a circus, wait till you see what happens to your government if this passes, because it's going to shut down government at virtually every level in the state. It sort of sounds like a good idea when you first think about it. Well, the government did something and it lowered the value of my land or whatever it is. But, I mean, virtually anything that the government does, whether it's the city, the county, the state, has a negative impact on somebody. And so if we're going to say that all of those people can go out and sue the government for putting in regulations, what kind of a mess is that going to be? So it's one of those unintended consequences. I don't know that the people that put this together thought that, this all the way through, that this was what was going to happen. But I think this is just a disaster waiting to happen, so I would encourage everyone to vote against that one.
Don?
You all better go buy a lottery ticket, for Gwen and I are in agreement on this. It's a land of unintended consequences. As an example, in our area a couple of years ago, there was a gravel pit that wanted to go in. And the neighbors fought it, saying it was going to devalue their property. It went through. If this happens, your county government is actually having a tough time. But your biggest budget item would be attorneys defending lawsuits. And like I say, on the surface, it sounds great, but the unintended consequences of it, frankly, scares the hell out of me.
Mark?
Thank you. Well, you better buy another one. I don't think 74 was written very well. I think the idea makes a lot of sense, and for those of us that own property, it does make some sense that things happen that impact us. But this one, I think, and I'm a member of Colorado Farm Bureau, and they're supporting this. I don't think this one had the right time and effort put in to the way it was written. I don't think it took into consideration what was going to happen to the small city, county, and those smaller governments around our state. Because someone could move into a place and say, oh, they passed something before I got here, and it devalued this property, and they could bring a lawsuit. We need to be taking a good hard look at what we can do to protect property rights right now. But I don't think 74 is the right way to go.
Seth?
I take a slightly more sinister view of it. I think 74 was created by the oil and gas industry as a way to prevent local governments from regulating fracking and oil and gas exploration. But, so I disagree with that to begin with. Then the unintended consequences happen on top of that. Because in effect, it would pretty much make it very, very difficult, if not impossible, for county and city governments to downzone anything, or change zoning on anything, or implement any kinds of regulations in the public interest for fear of triggering a takings case under this amendment. I think it's actually sinister, and I think people should vote against it.
Don, I think you're up.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask this question. How does the recent agreement among Colorado River states affect Southwest Colorado?
Well, I don't think there is an agreement. They're working on an agreement, but I don't think there's anything finalized. And Representative Catlin and I were very adamant that they were trying to take a situation where they could actually curtail your water rights, and they have backed off of that. And I think Representative Catlin and I had a great deal to do with that. But it's something that we really got to be vigilant on. As I told you earlier, you are in the crosshairs, and your water is the target to stay within the compact. And we really need to protect that.
All right, thank you. Mark?
Thank you. I've read some articles in regards to that agreement. The documents were introduced yesterday morning at 9 o'clock. We had a meeting about them at 10 a.m. on a webinar. My understanding is that we are still working on these agreements. Southern California really wants this agreement. They've overused water for 19 years, not knowing that they were in a drought. 1 million acre-feet more than what they had entitled to. Now they've got an empty pond down there, and they're really concerned, and they want your water to fix their problems. What this is about is people want us to change the way we live so that they can continue to live the way they are living. And the Front Range is as big a culprit in this as Southern California. They want our senior water rights to protect their junior water right that's Trans Mountain to Denver. We have not made a decision on that.
Seth?
I don't think that, stomping our feet and insisting that it's our water is going to get us anywhere. The Colorado River Compact is going to have to be litigated. Colorado is not going to have the kind of clout that we can simply say, no, 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 you can't have our water. I think it's going to be a complex negotiation, and very likely will go to the U.S. Supreme Court before it's all done and said and over with. I think the solution to these water problems is for us to work with our downriver, down basin states and the upper basin states and figure out a solution that's going to provide as much water as possible to all the parties. And I think part of that on our end is to fund the Colorado Water Project or something like it, so that we can do a much better job of managing our water resources and conserving as much as possible. But I think simply insisting they can't have our water is not going to solve the problem.
Gwen, you haven't answered that question.
So I had sort of thought I had read something totally different than what some of the other candidates are saying here. It was my understanding from what was reported in the press that there is in fact at least a preliminary agreement among the different states. And this is really not an intra-Colorado thing. It's not the Front Range versus the Western Slope. It's how the water from the Colorado River and the watershed and so on is shared across the states. And what I had read was that California has in fact now agreed, at least a preliminary agreement, that they will in fact start curtailing water use somewhat earlier than they were obligated to do it before. So there seems to be a lot of information flowing around, and I'm not a water expert, so I couldn't tell you exactly what's going on. But I think it is a step in the right direction, and as Seth said, there's got to be cooperation among the different states and a recognition that the water is finite. I mean, there's just so much.
Okay. We aren't getting many squeaks. You all are doing well with the time. Okay, I think, Mark, it's your turn to go first. Homelessness is a growing problem in this region. What could the legislature and/or you as leaders do to address this issue?
Well, I agree that it is a problem. But I'm not certain what we are going to be able to do about it, because I'm going to say this, I think the right answer is jobs. People need the opportunity to have a good, decent job that will pay the bills, that they can rent apartments and do those kind of things. I believe that some of the folks that are being attracted into the state of Colorado are attracted here for things other than finding a future for themselves. This is an easy place to come. Colorado is accommodating. And when that happens, we start to acquire more and more people with them. Front Range and Denver and those places are just packed. But I don't want to see Colorado turn into California with homeless camps and all those kind of things. I would certainly sit down and talk with anybody about ideas that they might have. But I think it's a much bigger problem than we're thinking.
Seth?
I think homelessness actually comes from three other bigger problems. One of the problems is the high cost of housing, which forces a lot of people out of their homes. Another problem is inadequate mental health services, because many, many people who find themselves homeless are people with mental health or drug addiction or alcohol addiction problems. So it kind of goes back to the question we talked about before about providing services for those folks. And the third piece of the problem is that wages have been stagnant since 1990, real earnings. The cost of housing is going up, and more people find themselves priced out of the housing market. So I do think that there are some things that need to be done. I think public housing is something that needs to be expanded in the state. I heard about this when I was in Denver. We used to think of unaffordable housing as being a ski county or an urban issue. It's now an everywhere in Colorado issue. And one of the solutions I would really like to explore is the one that's worked in the ski towns, which is deed restrictions. I think we need to provide a lot more affordable housing.
Okay, Gwen.
It is a complex problem, and some people try to make it into just one thing, like it's a mental health problem. But I mean, there are women out there who have children who are working but they're not making enough money to be able to rent an apartment. So, that's a problem. You've got, as we talked about, people who are addicted to drugs or alcohol, and so that's a problem. And, just creating housing for people doesn't solve those underlying problems. And so, again, one of the things I keep saying is we need to be able to give people a hand up. When somebody's got a problem, we need to find a solution for their problem and get them into a situation where they can be productive and they can, in fact, take care of themselves. So pretty much everything that I talk about is sort of aimed in that direction. How do we solve some of these underlying problems? And, again, having more affordable housing is certainly something that would be important. But we need to solve these underlying problems if we're really going to address this.
Well, I think it has multiple heads. Affordable housing doesn't work till you have a job to make the payment. But our problem really escalated with the passage of Amendment 64. I looked at Denver, and they flocked in there like crazy because marijuana was easily accessible. And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of mental health issues out there. There are a lot of people that have chosen that way of life. They're responsibility-free, and they've just taken that path of, I'm going to stand on the corner in front of City Market, and I'm going to make $100 a day. We offered a guy $50 for 3 hours of work, and he said, "Are you kidding? You think I'm going to give up this corner for $50? There's a real problem out there."
Okay, next question. What will you do to help local officials establish high-speed internet in our county? Okay.
Did you?
Seth, I think you're first.
I think there's already been action at the state level, thanks to our two incumbents, in fact, to increase access to broadband in rural areas. I'm not sure if it's adequately funded or not. I think that the state does have a role to play in bringing broadband to rural places, just as in the past there was rural electrification and rural telephone systems to help rural areas catch up with more densely populated areas and providing those essential pieces of infrastructure. I sincerely, I think that is a problem that may be whose solution may be at hand and underway, but possibly not. And if not, if it needs more funding, I would support that.
Gwen?
So I didn't mention when I was giving my intro that I sit on the board of the La Plata Electric Association. And if you look, this problem is really very similar to what we had back when people didn't have electricity in rural areas. So there was obviously the bill passed, a couple of bills passed in the last session that provided money to try to encourage rural broadband. It's not nearly enough money for everything I've read, and we probably do have to come up with more money. The one thing that I think is potentially a solution to this, or a partial solution, is to incentivize the rural electric co-ops to be able to bring broadband just as they brought electricity many years ago. And DMEA in Delta and Montrose has a very successful program going, and I'm certainly encouraging the La Plata Electric Association. I'd encourage you to go to your rural electric company and say, would you at least look at this and see if this is something that makes sense?
Don?
Thank you. Yes, I carried Senate Bill 2, and that was the Rural Broadband Fund. And it took the high-cost fund, the tax that you pay on your cell phone, your landline, and we're moving that over 2.6% over to broadband. The big winner on this for last several years has been CenturyLink. Between Connect America and High Cost Fund, CenturyLink has got $980 million, and they have not brought broadband to rural Colorado. And so I think that's a huge step forward. Is it the finish line? No, it's the starting line. But I started in 2012 working on broadband. I've passed several, and I will continue to work for it because that's the only thing we can do to level the playing field where we have equality in education, in jobs, telehealth, all the issues that broadband can bring. And thank you.
Mark?
Thank you. Well, I'm glad that Senator Quorum mentioned the words level the playing field, because I ran a bill called level the playing field in regards to broadband. What that bill does is it says that if a small company makes a bid for a city like Cortez to bring broadband, to bring, wire, glass wire into the community to give you the speed that you need, that when that small company goes to Denver to get that high cost fund in a grant, CenturyLink stepped forward and said, no, we'll handle it for you. We have the first right of refusal. They've done that in our district. And when they did, they didn't put in what was bid. They put in copper. This bill makes them match the speed and match the cost per household if they are going to exercise their first right of refusal.
Did you answer that first?
I didn't, I already.
Okay, thank you. All right. Gwen, you're going to get to be first this time.
Okay.
What is your opinion on county officials trying to take jurisdiction of federal lands?
We could probably get a whole bunch of different answers out here on this one. In general, to me, the public lands belong to the public. I mean, they belong to the entire country, everybody in the country. And there may be some situations where it makes sense to turn small bits of public land over to a county or the state. But in general, I'm not in favor of that. I think that we should keep the public lands public. And I think that that's the only way we're really going to protect them, because what ends up happening when you turn them over to another entity is somebody starts grabbing in there and trying to find a way to make money off of that. So, just like our national parks and our national forests and so on, it really needs to stay public, and it needs to be something that exists for us and for our children and our grandchildren and so on as we go along.
Don?
I'm a supporter of public lands. With that said, our local counties need to be equal partners in managing it. Our people are here on the ground are far better prepared to handle those lands than somebody in Washington, D.C. And I have a great deal of faith in our local Forest Service and BLM, but frankly, they're overridden by someone who knows nothing about it. They only know where Cortez, Colorado is on a map, and they know nothing about it. So I think coordination is the answer, that we work with the federal government to protect those lands and make the best use of it for the public.
Mark?
I would not really support counties taking over the property. I think they'd have a real hard time managing it the way that we need it to be managed. And I agree the public lands belong to the public. I do agree with county officials saying to the federal government on roads not being closed, I think that's called RS 277, I may not be sure. But I do think that the local community should have input as to which roads are left open that go into the public lands, how those public lands are used, and if a road is going to be closed, just summarily, everybody in the community should have an opportunity to talk about what that's going to do to their usage of those public lands. That type of jurisdiction, I would support a county commissioner that would always argue about whether or not that road should be closed or not.
Seth?
Yeah, national forests and BLM land belong as much to people who live in Denver or New York City as they belong to the people who live near them. I do, however, strongly support the collaborative management process that the BLM and Forest Service have been implementing over recent years. That process has yielded really good results, and that process essentially means that every stakeholder in public lands management has a seat at the table. That includes recreational users, license holders, and yes, county governments and city governments, local governments. So, so as long as when the federal land management agencies are developing management plans for those forests or those BLM lands, county commissioners should absolutely have a place at the table and should be able to exercise their influence there.
Gwen, you're first up, I think.
I was first on that one.
Yeah,
Okay. All right, so you're first up.
give me the question then.
Okay. Amendment 112. As written, can it be considered a takings for private property mineral rights? Maybe what you ought to do is talk about what 112 is. That's the setback for oil and gas, isn't it?
Yes, it is. That's a setback of 2,500 feet. Now, if you take 2,500 feet, and this is 2,500 feet, it's 2,500 feet in each direction. And that would effectively cut, Colorado's number one in the nation in oil and gas production right now. And we depend on, that's about number one or number two in our economy. It's millions of jobs, not millions of jobs, billions of dollars, about $32 billion to our economy. And the estimates are from 150 to 230,000 jobs. And I think it is far too extreme. The governor has been very good at setting an oil and gas commission and making those appointments. And I actually trust Governor John Hickenlooper.
Mark?
Thank you. Amendment 112, I oppose. I don't think that the state of Colorado can afford to ban oil and gas in the state of Colorado. If you like DOLA, the Department of Local Affairs, where we get the grants that we use in our communities to do the good things we've been doing, that money comes from severance tax. Without oil and gas, you won't have severance tax. The other half that I think we all support is the fact that the Department of Natural Resources is funded by severance taxes. If we're going to build storage vessels in the state of Colorado, we've got to have severance taxes to start being able to build water so that we can manage our own water and store it and use it and consume it and meet our compact requirements. So I don't think it would be good business on the part of the state to get rid of the oil and gas industry in the state.
Seth?
I have very mixed feelings about this measure. It's really the only ballot question I do have mixed feelings about. My brain says it's probably 2,500 feet is too much, and my heart says I think we should try to go with it. So the reason that I think the arguments for opposing this amendment to me are the economic arguments that they provide, that oil and gas still provides jobs in Colorado, but even more important than that, natural gas especially is a necessary transition fuel as we move to a carbon-free economy in the future. We have to have a carbon-free economy. In order to get there, we have to have natural gas. Colorado has natural gas. It should probably be used and provide economic benefit until it's used, until we can get off of it. On the other hand, I think we need to go there as quickly as humanly possible, and this buffer zone would certainly incentivize people to move more quickly toward the carbon-free future that we need to have. So I'm really torn on it. I can see both sides.
Gwen?
There's a whole lot of misinformation flowing around about this. The idea that it would stop all new development in Colorado is completely absurd. There was a News 9 thing I saw where they took a map and they drew out the places that you would still be able to drill, not on public lands, but the ones that would be affected by this. And it's almost all on the Front Range. It really would shut down any sort of new development where we are. So, again, just be careful when you're listening to politicians talking about stuff like this and try to get the facts. I'm very much think that we do need to do everything we can to protect the health of people that live around places that drilling is happening. I don't think that 112 is particularly well written because it's a one-size-fits-all. I mean, it basically says that 2,500 feet is what it's going to be everywhere under every circumstance. And it really would devastate our economies here. It wouldn't do it immediately because it doesn't apply to existing wells. But as time goes by, it would really be hurtful. So I like the idea of protecting people's health, but I'm not going to support this one.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. You answered last, so you get to go first.
I did.
You did go
You
first.
just went first.
Mark is next.
Okay, that's what I wrote down, but
Want me to help
somehow.
you here?
No. Thank you.
I'll do it.
Well, you can just poke me and
I'll do
say. Okay. Mark, how will you support the transition to a clean energy economy here in Colorado? And what will you do for workers in fossil fuel energy jobs?
Well, the first thing I do is keep them employed until we've made that transition. I'm a believer in all of the above as far as energy is concerned. We simply cannot move rapidly enough to get to be a carbon-free economy in the times that are being quoted. It's going to take time for us to transition. You can see what's happening with coal. You can see what's happening with these kind of amendments talking to us about oil and gas. I'm a believer in hydropower, in wind, and in solar. But I don't think we can move that fast to where we're displacing thousands of jobs without hurting the state in many more ways than we already are talking about. You know, I'm a neighbor to a county that's lost a lot of coal mining jobs, and that county is in deep trouble. I don't think the state should be in that deep of trouble.
I think the state is going to be in a lot deeper trouble if we don't get off carbon and get off it as quickly as possible. Mark voted against even setting targets in the legislature. He voted against a bill that set targets for carbon reduction by, I think it was 2020. Setting targets seems to me to be the very least we can do. He also voted against very modest restrictions and regulations on wellhead safety and on transparency in pipeline locations. I don't think he's ever voted against a bill that does the slightest bit of regulation on oil and gas, and I frankly disagree with that. Colorado is a leader in moving toward a carbon-free future, and I would like to work very hard to keep Colorado the leader in that effort. So I would support, in terms of the displacement of people, look, I ran a newspaper that was crushed by the internet. So I know what it's like to be in an industry that gets caught up in by changing times. And, you know, I think we need to do everything possible to help people, but jobs do become obsolete.
Gwen.
So, you know, it's not like we're talking about changing to 100% renewables tomorrow or the next year or the next year. But, you know, as we said, the climate here is almost certainly going to get drier and hotter. And you ask yourself, what does that do? And we've seen it this summer with the lack of water, with the lack of snow. It's going to kill outdoor recreation jobs, and it's going to really hurt ag. I mean, think about it, hotter and drier. You know, this is not good. And so we've got to do something to get to clean energy and stop putting carbon dioxide into the air. In terms of the people that are impacted by this, we can take care of those people. There are many, many more renewable energy jobs in solar and wind than there are in coal. So we can retrain people. We can give them extended unemployment benefits. We can take care of our neighbors as this happens, but we can't go backward. We can't go back to where, you know, we're just burning coal as much as we possibly can.
Well, thank you, and I was thrilled to hear you quote Donald Trump, but there's two reports on that, and both sides says it's fake news, so I don't know what it is, but we'll take what it is. But I got good news and I got bad news for y'all. I'm looking around the room. We will go to a renewable energy program. Looking at you all, you're all going to be dead when it happens. So we have to move with what we have now. We have to be responsible, and responsible energy development is what we will continue to do, and we will work toward that, and when it is right, it will happen.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Gwen, you're first. No, Seth is first. Oh, you haven't gone yet. Okay.
No, I spoke about.
Okay, all right, sorry.
He's number one.
I was number one, yeah.
Yeah, my brain's getting tired, I'm sorry. In this time of drought, what are your strategies for water conservation.
I think it goes to Lynn. I just answered the last question first.
I thought Mark went first. You went first?
Oh, you did? Mark
Mark
went
went
Yeah,
first? Okay.
yeah.
All right, water. The hotter, drier climate is already happening. And even if we were to move in a reasonable time frame, which is long before all of us are dead, to reduce the amount of carbon that's going into the air, we're still condemned to a hotter, drier climate because of the amount of carbon that's already in the air. So we do have to step up our efforts to manage the water we do have very, very wisely and very, very carefully. And that includes full funding of the Colorado Water Plan, and it includes conservation measures. Mark voted against 2 water conservation measures. I have no clue why he did that. He voted against a bill that would have allowed farmers to conserve water without risking their water rights. He voted against a bill to require real estate developers to include a water conservation plan. That is no way to manage our water. We need to conserve water everywhere possible. If we fail to conserve water, the first victim is going to be agriculture. And I would
Okay.
hate to see that.
Time. Let me remind everybody, the question is, what are your strategies for water conservation? So Gwen, you're next.
So, I think it's clear we've got to conserve water. And so we start looking at how do we do that. Ag uses a very large portion of the water that gets used in the state, and that's necessary. There are, however, some options there that we can do. I know that there's a lot of people still have these very old irrigation systems which tend to lose a lot of water through evaporation. But there are newer things that people can buy that will allow them to get the same results using less water. So I think the state needs to make an investment there to help farmers and ranchers, make those purchases that they need to do in order to be more efficient. Certainly across the state, we ought to have on new housing, there ought to be water conservation built in, low flow, shower heads, and all those kinds of things. And it's going to take a big effort, to really get to the point where we can conserve enough water to where everybody can still live well.
Well, we have done a lot of those things already. We are on the low flow, but conservation and efficiency are not the same thing. In the Uncompahgre Valley, where I live, and the company that Mark managed, we use that water 7 times. And everybody's talking about going to a sprinkling system where you don't get the runoff. I will never forget, in Water Resources, we had T. Wright Dickinson, who was president of the Colorado Cattlemen's Association. He said, my biggest fear, he lives on the Green River on the edge of Utah, my biggest fear is when it rains in Steamboat in May, because they don't irrigate. And I'm out of water by August then, because the river, the flow goes on by. Timing is a huge factor that nobody talks about. We introduced aquifer storage. Senator Roberts and I had bills to limit green grass in the metropolitan area. And I have a bill title to fund the Colorado Water Plan.
Thank you. I'm glad to know that my opponent does want to fund the Colorado. Oh,
She needs to start over.
oh, I'm sorry. I'm ready. Well, I am glad to hear that Mr. Kagan does support the Colorado Water Plan, because the primary piece of that is more storage in the state of Colorado. I am interested in more storage in the state of Colorado. From a water conservation point of view, I think the low-hanging fruit in regards to saving water is modernizing our delivery systems. Piping and lining, your benefit out here on the pipe system, you don't use nearly the amount of water that you could if that was in open ditches. I believe that if we line the canals, we pipe the laterals, that we will save up to 20 to 25% of the water that's diverted into these projects. That water is the first water that we should be attempting to save, because we can get grants to do that. Forcing a farmer to buy an irrigation system will put him out of business, and we will open this state wide open for corporate farming because they can afford to buy those sprinkler systems, and they will buy those sprinkler systems on the land they buy from our neighbors.
Okay. Next question. I think, Gwen, it is your turn.
I think so.
I've got you back here.
Thank you. I appreciate that. 21 years ago, the legislature passed a law requiring parity between mental and physical health. It hasn't happened. What would you do to see that the law is enforced and funded?
So unfortunately, I don't know, what the problem really is there. This is not something that I've been asked before. It's clear that you've got to have incentives to get people to follow the law. And presumably, if there is a law that requires that parity and people are not doing it, then we need to up the enforcement, or we need to, create incentives for people to actually do what they're supposed to do. So it's something that we certainly could look into, and this gets back to so many of the things that we talk about. In order for you to fix this, you've got to understand what's really going on. Why is that parity not occurring? And some of it may just be that it's always been that way. But we'd have to dig down into it and say, this is what's really going on, and this is how we can fix it.
Don?
And I'm not aware of this either, but the fact that a piece of legislation passes doesn't mean it's going to be funded. I've passed, we were talking about water originally, free edifies, but it was severance tax, and it was funded 1 year of the 5-year program. So it's probably one of those things, the Joint Budget Committee, the governor set the budget, and we have so many conflicts in our state budget. When I got there 8 years ago, our budget was $17.9 billion. Now we're $30 billion, and we still have things that we can't fund.
Mark, do you want me to repeat this?
Well, yeah.
Okay. 21 years ago, the legislature passed a law requiring parity between mental and physical health. It hasn't happened. What would you do to see that the law is enforced and funded?
In regards to funding, I think that the state's going to have to make some priority decisions at the Joint Budget Committee level and at the governor's level and even in the House of Representatives. I do know that one of the problems with mental health is that it's had such a stigma on it, particularly back at 21 years ago, that it may not have gotten the people moving towards getting mental health, and it didn't become a priority. I believe that in today's world, we are recognizing mental health is a serious problem, and mental health impacts physical health, and it impacts our emotional health. I hope that our community and our society is moving towards the idea that now is the time to start talking about mental health and finding ways that we can help people that are suffering.
I think the best thing we could do to make mental health services available to more people is to get more people covered with health insurance. The Affordable Care Act does include mental health services. That does require that health insurance include coverage for mental health issues. With such large numbers of people unable to afford health insurance, they are also deprived of coverage for mental health issues. So I think that the first thing we need to do, or it goes hand in hand with making health insurance more affordable for more people so that more people have coverage. In addition to that, the other thing the state can do and needs to do to bring healthcare costs down is provide funding for services in underserved areas, like Western Colorado, and I think mental health coverage is part of that, or mental health services are part of that.
Okay. Don, you're
Are you sure?
next. I am sure. I wrote it down.
Talk slow.
Okay. How are you planning to prevent future large water diversions from western slope rivers and pipe it to the Front Range?
Well, that's a very difficult situation to answer, because under Colorado law, the Colorado Constitution, water belongs to the people of the state of Colorado. And if you can prove a beneficial use, and you want to make a change, you have to go through the engineering, you have to go through the legal system and present it to the water state engineer, and the state engineer has up or down on that situation. The thing is that we've got to make them and realize that they need to conserve what we're sending them now. We have about 4 million acre feet more than the compact with Nebraska that is leaving the state in the last 3 years. So, but legally we cannot stop it. But we can do some things where they don't want to do it.
Okay. Mark?
Well, to begin with, the Colorado River is over appropriated. In other words, there are more water rights in the Colorado River than there is water. What would worry me the most, particularly on the western slope of Colorado, is buy and dry. We've seen that happen on the eastern slope, where the municipalities come in and start buying blocks of ranches and moving the water towards their consumptive use in Denver, Colorado Springs, and Pueblo. We want to make sure that we are working to keep that from happening here. The counties have some 1041 capacities that they can step forward and say, wait, you can't do that to our county without just compensation. That Colorado River has compensatory storage on it for those existing trans-mountain diversions. What I would expect is going to happen in the future is that we will become the makeup rivers for the sins that are committed on the Front Range. In other words, we will send water downstream to protect those junior water rights.
Seth?
Well, Colorado water law is one of the most complicated bodies of law on the planet. And conserving water, trans-basin diversions are something to be avoided at all costs, but it would be politically and legally very difficult, if not impossible, to prevent the transfer of water to thirsty urban populations. So I believe that what we need to do is focus on conservation and water management to reduce the demand from those thirsty places. The biggest concern I have is the potential loss of agricultural land in western Colorado. The agricultural land is so beautiful, provides our open space, bolsters our economy, and provides food that we all eat. So I would really hate to see shortages of water, buy and dry, or other diminishment of water reduce the amount of agricultural land in the state, in the western slope.
Gwen?
So, even if it weren't a constitutional effort, a constitutional issue, we're obviously outnumbered in the legislature. I mean, the Front Range has got, 85% of the population? So, there's nothing that any candidate can stand up and say, well, I'm going to go protect, our water rights, and I can get it done. Because it's a very difficult problem. I think the key is to make it clear to the other people in the state what the value of the water here really is. I mean, they're obviously buying food, agricultural products that are coming from here. So we've got to really get to the point where everybody understands that water is critical here, and that the things that it does here are critical to the entire state. So it's a matter of working, with the people in the Front Range and with the people in the other party within the legislature.
Okay, Mark, you're up next, I think. What? This is going to be the last question before the sum up. Yes, I'm watching the time. How would you improve the economy on the western slope?
Well, I think, what I'm hoping to be able to do is that we will start to harvest the forests on the western slope, that we'll go back into the mining industry on the western slope, that we bring jobs that are well-paying, that you can raise a family on, and that you don't have to. Our number one export in the western slope of Colorado is our kids. We raise them up to be good, solid citizens. We send them to university, and they can't afford to come home. So our communities continue to age quicker, and we need more services. What we need is a way to attract the young people in the state of Colorado. And the way we do that is with jobs that they can afford to buy that house, can afford to have their kids in school, can afford to be able to live in this community and raise a family and be proud of the place they live.
Seth, what would you do?
Well, the two biggest issues that I've been talking about are unaffordable health care and underfunded schools, and I think addressing both of those issues would help draw employers. I think high health insurance costs affect employers as much as they affect people in the individual market. When I ran a small business, it was backbreaking for me to try to provide health insurance for my employees because here in western Colorado, small group plans are extremely expensive. So reducing healthcare costs would certainly make the area more attractive to employers. Similarly, one of the very first things that any business looks at when they consider where to relocate is the quality of schools. And if we improve our schools and we reduce the healthcare costs, those are things that could help draw more better employers to western Colorado.
Gwen?
And on an even broader approach to that, it's infrastructure that you have to have in order to attract companies to come here and have good jobs. So that's everything that we've talked about. It's the ability to provide health care for people. It's the quality of the education in the school systems. It's the quality of the roads and the bridges. Can people get around? It's broadband, all of those things. We're not going to magically just hope that people locate here and bring better jobs. We've got to do something about it if we want that to happen. And so really building the infrastructure so that companies find this attractive, not just because they're outside and it's a great view, that they really feel that they can come here and make a good profit and bring good paying jobs, requires that we cover all of those infrastructure areas so that those companies will want to move here.
Buy one more lottery ticket. Yeah, and I agree with everything that was said there. But there's also things that we can do, and I am doing. I'm working with the Department of Local Affairs. I'm working with the Ag Department. We have something that happened called the Opportunity Zone. And that's where it's a federal program where you can take your investment and invest it in a company in this Opportunity Zone, and you won't pay corporate taxes on that if you leave it there for 10 years. And we've got actually people that are looking for properties in these Opportunity Zones, and will provide jobs. So we're moving slowly, but we are moving, and we've got our eye on the target.
Right, thank you. Now is the time for your political speech. We'd like all of you to tell us why we should vote for you. And you have 2 minutes, and Seth, we're going to start with you.
In these forums and during this campaign, I keep having this feeling that we're sort of talking around the really big issues that we all face. I feel that the country, the world, and the 58th House District are confronted with two really existential problems. The first one is the hollowing out of the American middle class, and the fact that so many Americans and so many of the people whose doors I knock on are feeling impoverished and disadvantaged. And that's happening because while real wages have been stagnant since 1990, the costs of the four basic foundations of a middle-class life have gotten out of reach for people. That's housing, health care, college tuition, and retirement savings. More and more people are working harder and harder and finding it's impossible to get ahead. And that's because of wage stagnation and also the impoverishment of public services like bad schools and health care. The other elephant in the room is the ongoing and imminent destruction of our natural environment. It's not just global warming, although global warming is the underlying cause, but our forests are unhealthy, our water is scarce, our agriculture is suffering, and anything that we do that doesn't directly address those two problems is a waste of our time. I mean, we need to, if I'm elected, every single thing I do will be about improving the standard of living and quality of life and opportunity for working people. And everything I do will be about protecting and preserving our natural environment. Because if we don't accomplish those two goals, it's going to be very hard for us to sustain ourselves as a society.
Gwen?
There are some big differences between Senator Quorum's positions on some of these things. And we talked about health care. If you look at his record over the last 8 years he's been in the legislature, there's not really very much that he's done to try to improve the health care situation. The second thing is education. Yes, again, there have been some bills that have been passed, but we're still, there was an article a couple of weeks ago said that Colorado teachers make 21% less today than they did in 1990 after adjusting for inflation. So the only thing I've heard from my opponent is that's a local school board issue. Well, so maybe the state needs to step up and make sure that the local school boards can in fact pay teachers a decent wage, a livable wage, so that they're not having to work a second or third job to make ends meet. So again, that's something that I would work very hard on, and I think the state has a role in that. The third thing is what Seth was talking about, which is climate change and global warming. Again, there are people who deny that it's even happening at the very highest levels in government, and yet the evidence, the scientific evidence, is very clear and overwhelming that this is going on, and it's being caused by people burning fossil fuels. And my opponent says it's okay to keep burning coal. Coal is the dirtiest fuel we have, right? It's dirty to mine it, it's dirty to transport it, it's dirty to burn it. And it puts out more carbon dioxide than any other fuel source that we have. So we've got to start moving to clean energy. We need to move as fast as we can. The good thing about that is the price of the clean energy is coming down so fast that we're actually going to save a bunch of money by doing that. And we're going to create new jobs. So there are some big differences between Don Quorum's positions on these issues and my positions. And I think that that's what you should consider when it comes time to vote.
Don?
Thank you, and I respect your right to be wrong. Let's talk about what I've done. I've heard this story at every debate, and so I actually took the opportunity to look at legislation that I ran on either health or education. And there's 27 bills that I was the prime sponsor of dealing with those situations. So I think that is actually, let's just call it fake news. Can we do that? Let's call it fake news. Go ahead. All right. But I have a record. I've been there 8 years. I have someone that I've been able to go in and talk to people. I have the governor send me a text. I need to talk to you. This is a piece of legislation we need to work on. I think you're the best guy to get it done. Department agencies. And I haven't always been successful, but sometimes I've always found a way to get around it. I ran a bill a few years ago to provide long-acting reversible contraceptives, and that was killed in the Senate. And I told my Democrat sponsor, don't worry, we'll do it through the budget process. I ran the bill through the budget process knowing that the House would vote for it, the Senate would kill it, and the conference committee is the joint budget committee, and I had 4 of the 6. That's all I needed. That has cut the abortion rate by 64% and saved the state $70 million. And those are the kinds of things that I do. I'm an out-of-the-box type of guy. I know the Herald called me a different breed of politician. Senator Heath called me the cat because a different breed of cat. But I think I've done very well representing you, and I ask for your support. Thank you.
Mark, you get the last word.
the last word.
Boy, only here, not at home.
I can't help you with that.
Well, you know, I think probably the biggest difference between me and my opponent is that, one, I truly love this area. I love the 58th District. I was born and raised here. I've taken a number of family vacations down here because the Cortez is a spiritual place, believe me. I think the Native Americans got it right. What I try to do in the House of Representatives is I'm a believer that if the bills that I run are started here in the 58th District, I believe that if they will work in the 58th District, they will work statewide. We've had enough of Denver down. We live a long ways from Denver, so they get a lot of time to take advantage of us. What we've been suffering from is top-down government. I believe that if we can start these bills in the 58th District and move them up, they work in Denver just as well as they work here, because we have the same type of problems. But what happens is that in the state government, the bureaucracies and the other, and you know, a lot of times, the split between rural and urban is incredible. It's bigger than the split between Democrats and Republicans. One of the things that I've done is created the Rural Caucus, which allows people from rural Colorado to have interface with our urban cousins, as we like to call them, so that they start to understand what our problems are, what our issues are, what we think we need to do. It's surprising with this piece of, it's kind of like a club, you know? I buy them a cup of coffee and a donut on Friday morning, and we talk about what's going on in Colorado. They want to know. No one has told them. Part of my job as your representative is to bring the issues to them so that we can build those coalitions, we can build those items across the aisle, and we will make law that impacts and helps the 58th District.
Okay. I want to thank the candidates especially because they all had to drive here, some from fairly far away like Montrose. And we appreciate you running so that we have choices because it's frustrating as voters not to have those choices. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Or to it all.